Standing Committee on the Status of Women. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of September 23rd, 2020. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website, and the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. In order to have an orderly meeting, let's talk about a few rules. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available, and at the bottom of your screen, you can choose Floor, English, or French. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And if you're on the video conference, please click on the microphone icon to unmute yourself. Those in the room, your microphone will be controlled as normal by the Proceedings and Verification Officer. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. And then I think we'll go into our panel on unpaid work. So today we have as witnesses Andrea Doucette, who is the Professor and Canada Research Chair in Gender, Work and Care. And from the Vanier Institute of the Family, we have Nora Spinks, who's the President and CEO. Each of you will have 5 minutes to make your opening remarks, and after that, we'll go into our round of questions. And so, Andrea, we'll start with you for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to speak on this timely topic of women's unpaid work. I'm speaking as a Canada Research Chair and Project Director of a new 7-year partnership grant funded by the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. This grant is focused on policies, especially childcare, parental leave, and employment policies that support families' paid and unpaid work. I'm pleased to say that 3 of our grant partners are here today: Women and Gender Equality Canada, Statistics Canada, and the Vanier Institute of the Family. My short remarks are also informed by my 25 years of research on caregiving fathers and my methodological writing on how we measure unpaid care work. I frame my remarks around what British feminist economist Diane Elson calls the 3 R's for analyzing unpaid work: recognize, reduce, redistribute. Recognize. We recognize that care and the care economy underpins and makes possible the so-called real or essential economy. We recognize that our economy, in the words of my colleague Nancy Folbray, actually take a free ride on the care economy. Society gets a pass, while women, especially mothers, take on the work and the costs of care. We recognize that care is a human, not a female capacity. Men's involvement in care can be transformative for men, for families, for societies. We recognize the extraordinarily high socioeconomic value of unpaid care work and the high economic value of investing in high quality paid care work, including elder care and childcare. The economic benefits of investing in childcare are well detailed in recent studies from the UK Women's Budget Group and from Jim Stanford from the Centre for Futures Work. These economic benefits include, for example, direct and indirect job creation, increased tax dollars, increased GDP. This brings me to my second point: reduce. How does one reduce unpaid work? In the global north, including Canada, a key social infrastructure to reduce women's unpaid work and to facilitate their paid work is childcare. As well said in the recent throne speech, the time is now for significant, long-term, sustained investment in high-quality, affordable, accessible childcare. Redistribute. A 2019 report by the International Labour Organization on unpaid care work analyzed time use surveys from 23 countries around the globe, including Canada. They concluded, around the world, without exception, women do 3/4, 75% of unpaid care work. There is no country where women and men take an equal share of unpaid care work. To redistribute unpaid work, here are at least 2 things to consider. First, how do we support fathers' involvement in unpaid work? One important argument repeatedly made by parental leave scholars, including myself, is that fathers' take-up of parental leave is a lever for gender change in paid and unpaid work. Just as the federal government is looking to the province of Quebec for lessons on childcare, we should look to Quebec for lessons on policy design that will support more fathers taking parental or paternity leave. And I'm happy to discuss this more in the question period. A second point about redistributing unpaid work is how to measure it. The 1995 Beijing Platform for Action called upon countries to make visible and to measure unpaid work through time use studies. But time use studies can only go so far in measuring unpaid work. They measure care and housework tasks, but they do not measure responsibilities for unpaid work. As I have argued for 25 years, it is the responsibilities for unpaid work that are extremely difficult to shift. We need stronger methodological tools for measuring the responsibilities for unpaid work. For example, combining time use diaries with qualitative research on people's stories about how they use time and live time, or time diaries that include open-ended questions that tap into sociocultural norms that underpin gendered responsibilities for unpaid work. And we need disaggregated data so that we can track diversity, equity, and inclusion in unpaid work. To conclude, according to the ILO, it will take around 210 years to close the gender gap in unpaid care work. The time to act is now. Canada has been a leader on gender equality. It needs to act now on childcare, on parental leave, and we need more and stronger data, and we need to harness that data in policy development. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll go to Ms. Spinks for 5 minutes.
Thank you, and good day. It's an opportunity to provide testimony here today. I would like to first acknowledge our meeting on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people and pay my respects to Indigenous elders past, present, and emerging. It's an honor to appear today with my fellow panelists. I'm the president and CEO of the Vanier Institute of the Family. The Institute is a research and education organization dedicated to understanding the diversity of families and the complexity of family life in Canada. We are here today to discuss the critically important role that women play in our families, communities, society, and economy. To understand the valuable contributions that women make, we need to frame women's paid and unpaid work, caring for and supporting children, youth, adults, and seniors within Canada's care economy. We need to deepen our understanding of and increase our investments in the care economy. Historically, Canada, like most countries, have focused on creating a vibrant and prosperous market economy. Historically, care was largely provided by women in private homes. Today, the systems of care have become much more complex and more diverse. COVID has highlighted the strengths and vulnerabilities in our market economy and the need for a strong, dynamic care economy. Developing a strong, adaptable, and vibrant post-pandemic care economy will make it possible for the Canadian government to meet domestic and international commitments and to make or exceed public and global expectations. Today in Canada, like most countries, care is still largely provided by women. Care to family and friends, care provided through civil society in the nonprofit and philanthropic sectors, and care delivered through government services, such as hospitals and health science centers. The market economy is our traditional frame of reference. The care economy is our emerging, complementary, intertwined economic force. The market economy has a financial focus based on the movement of financial capital in markets and businesses. The care economy has a human focus based on the movements of human capital between homes and communities. The market economy measures success by growth in wealth. The care economy measures success by growth in health. When you buy a wheelchair, you make a purchase in the market economy. The wheelchair is a commodity. However, the occupational therapist who measures you for optimum fit, teaches you how to use it, supports you to integrate it into your life, is part of the care economy. The care economy is driven by humanity and compassion, is based on dignity and respect, and is framed around equity and fairness. In the market economy, someone sells and someone buys goods or services. Goods and services have a cash or monetary value. In the care economy, someone provides and someone receives care. Care has intrinsic value. The market economy is based on cash transactions, on competition, market share, and ownership. The care economy is based on relationships, on compassion, sustainability, and equity. The market economy is based on private gain, measured by gross domestic product, or GDP. The care economy is based on public good, measured by gross domestic experience, also known as the Human Wellbeing Index. The two economies together are required to maximize our national potential. The two economies together are core to our social and economic well-being. They are intertwined. The two economies impact and are impacted by families. The two economies are influenced by cultural, political, and environmental factors. They are interdependent. The two economies can't function effectively without the other. Like a ladder, the two side rails being the market economy and the care economy, and the rungs of the ladder represented by the various systems. Our monetary system, healthcare, childcare systems, our justice system, just to name a few. To grow, to prosper, and to progress up the ladder, all components need to be present and function well together. Investments in the care economy will benefit all Canadians, regardless of social economic status, gender, abilities, immigration status, or cultural background. But those who will benefit most in those investments are women. In conclusion, if we recognize that women's unpaid and paid labor is critical for our social and economic well-being, if we frame women's contribution as part of the care economy rather as simply a subset of the market economy, and if we focus on the importance of relationships of care within the care economy, then together we will be able to optimize women's well-being. I look forward to our conversations today. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. Now we're going to enter our first round of questions, starting with Ms. Wong for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of the panelists, on a very, very important topic. COVID-19 has served to highlight the critical intersection of family, aging, and care work, especially for women. As we know, seniors are the most vulnerable and have borne the brunt of serious cases of COVID, including deaths. Prior to hospitalization, many of these seniors were recipients of caretaker support, both formal and informal, as indicated by both of our panelists. And naturally, those that have managed to avoid hospitalization are also receiving caretaker support. So this question is addressed to our second panelist. On your website, you have a fair amount of literature discussing the impact of COVID-19 on the family. I was wondering if your organization has done any research specific to informal caregiver support. If you have, what had you found? And if not, is there something your organization would consider looking at in the future? And I've learned so much from both of you, as a former researcher myself, definitely, we've gone to a new paradigm right now.
Thank you for that great question, Madam Chair. It's been a really important period of time for social research. We have this unexpected opportunity to really deeply understand the dynamics and the interplay with families and community. And a big part of that is the role that caregivers play. And when we talk about care, we talk about two distinctive groups, and often both groups represent women largely. So the caregivers and what is often referred to as the informal care providers. We don't like the idea of informal. There's nothing informal about it. They're giving care, and they give it without any recognition, without any support, without any acknowledgement in a lot of cases. They give care. Care providers provide care. They're paid, they're structured, they may be volunteers, but they're associated with some kind of an entity. So during COVID, starting back in March, we started working with some partners to poll families week over week. Since then, we have been exploring all aspects of COVID and the impacts that it has on family. And one of the most significant ones is the challenge that families face in either being locked in or locked out during lockdown with respect to senior care. So I may be locked in and not have access to supplementary care. So over the summer, I was providing palliative care. I was locked in providing senior services. The care sector was locked out. They couldn't come in. The palliative care nurses stopped coming. The personal support workers stopped coming. They weren't available to me. My colleague was locked out of the care long-term care facility that her mother was in. She used to go regularly. She used to attend. She used to provide supplementary supports. So the research shows that both those experiences are real and have huge impact on our ability to participate in the paid labor force, but also in the quality of the experience that seniors have. So whether you're locked in or locked out, there are excruciating decisions that need to be made. There are circles of support that need to be in place in order for that to happen. And we've seen women having to leave paid employment for periods of time, if not permanently, in order to fulfill their care responsibilities. So it is a really important thing that we need to continue to monitor as we go forward.
Thank you very much, Gina. In fact, you have already answered part of my second question. That is about the impact of COVID on lock-in and lock-out and social isolation. Seniors probably, are the hard hit, as I mentioned in my first question. And then because of the death tolls in seniors' homes and long-term care homes, I mean, a lot of families are reluctant in sending their seniors even back to the care homes. So right now, you have additional family care duties on the caregivers, whether they are parents, their children, or even young people. Now, my focus is caring for the carers, because of course they put in so much passion and relation. That is the human value of it. Exactly, it's what both of our panelists have just mentioned. So my focus is on caring for the mental health, especially of our caregivers. So do you have any insight on this, please?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The research is showing very clearly that connections make the difference. And you can be living alone in a single person household, but if you have connections, whether it's over the phone, online, or in person, you will be in a position to achieve greater success and experience less isolation and loneliness.
Very good. I'm sorry, that's your time. We're going now to Ms. Dillon for 6 minutes.
Thank you to our witnesses for being here this morning. I'll start with Andrea Doucet, our witness, who spoke about very eloquently the role of men when it comes to caregiving. So my first question is, you spoke about the throne speech and our government's commitment to have high quality care. What suggestions would you make to the committee as to how we can give people good quality care and fulfill our throne speech promise? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So to give good quality care, are you talking about childcare in particular, or just more broadly?
In general.
Well, if we look at the different policy domains, if we start with childcare, we need well-paid childcare workers in the same way that the COVID-19 revealed the problems with marketized private elder care homes where the care workers were moving between sites and were not supported. It's the same with childcare. There's a lot of it's a low-paid occupation. Because it's low paid, a lot of men don't go into it. There's a lot of arguments about how to change the social norms around care. It would be good to have men also involved in the early years of care. So well-paid care, in the same way that Nora was drawing the intra-connections between paid work and unpaid care work. I think we both agree on that. The ILO has what's called the paid work, unpaid work, paid care work circle, and the paid care work is really, really important. Why are these workers so devalued? If we're going to value care work, it also means paying care workers such as elder care workers and child care workers well. And because that is how you recognize their work. You don't just praise them or clap for them at the end of the day the way that people do for healthcare workers, which is great, but it's not enough. We need to put money behind that. So that would be one answer in terms of how to recognize and value unpaid care work, is to actually make it allow people to have a livable wage where they can work one job. And yeah.
Perfect. And you spoke also about men providing care. And have you noticed between the care men provide and women provide, because it's very curious, it does end up falling to women to take care of, whether it's childcare, an elderly parent, a sick spouse, or anything like that. This is how it happens. And we've noticed in COVID how much more intense that's become. And my question to you is whether you find that when men are doing the same care, are they facing the same challenges women are facing, the same diminishment of, we could say, funds or even poverty or getting to that line? Are men also facing that? Because something you said was very interesting. Giving care is human work. It shouldn't be a man's work or a woman's work, or it's human work. And I found that very, very interesting, because that speaks to equality as well. So if you can please tell us, are they as disadvantaged as women become when they have to leave their workplace, when they have to sacrifice in the same way? So it would be very interesting to know, because we don't talk much about men giving care, because it's predominantly women. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question. Absolutely, to care is a human capacity. So I would just make that point again, and thank you for picking up on it. Men, I've studied stay-at-home fathers and single fathers and LGBTQ fathers or gay father households. When men leave work to care, they face the same disadvantages as women in some ways. But one of my colleagues, R.W. O'Connell, argued many years ago that there's still a patriarchal dividend. So men still, even when they leave work, there's still an assumption that men are primary breadwinners, that there's still connections between men and power in public life. So they don't experience it in the same way socially, but certainly when men leave paid work to care, they do face some of the same disadvantages, and they face different challenges because communities, having studied this for over 25 years, when fathers go into play groups and these sort of what I've called maternal dominated spaces, it can be very challenging for them. So I think we need to change the social norms. That's why parental leave and paternity leave has been very important to me as a scholar, because when you see men walking around with strollers, as you do in the Nordic countries, it begins to shift the idea that it's only women that can do that work, especially with young children. And I know there's cultural differences around this that we need to be really sensitive to. So it means really looking at the social norms and how they're changing. But I would say, having studied men and caregiving, that when men do it, they change enormously, and it has benefits for women and for children and for families, and they can do it as well as women can. There should be no difference, and sometimes it's in the eyes of the viewer that they see the difference.
Perfect. And I just wanted to say
time.
Okay.
And Madame Larouche, 6 minutes.
Oui. 6 minutes. Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here with us. You'll understand from my questions that this is something that is very dear to me and that I've been following for a long time. I'm happy to have heard what you had to say. But dear colleagues, witnesses, please forgive me. I would like to provide a notice of motion for a study that could be interesting to us, because you've probably heard about it in the news, and I'm sure you'll understand. I'll read the notice of motion, and I'll provide a copy afterwards, and afterwards I'll go to my questions. that pursuant to Standing Order 1082, the committee undertake a study on the sexual violence and exploitation experienced by women and the distribution of pornography and child pornography for electronic commerce purposes by Canadian companies or companies with headquarters on Canadian soil that distribute pornography, including child pornography, with total impunity and under no Canadian legislative framework whatsoever, that the committee examine as part of its work the case of the Pornhub digital platform that belongs to the Canadian business MindGeek, whose headquarters are in Montreal, and that globally distributes pornography, including child pornography, produced and distributed with total impunity and without restrictions.
Point of order, Madam Chair. It doesn't relate to topic of the study.
My understanding is that she can bring the notice of motion, but there will be no debate about the motion. She just wants to make sure it's on the record so that we can discuss it at the January meeting.
Okay, je vais
I will finish and then move on to my questions, and we can talk about the motion later. B, the devastating psychological effects on victims of sex crimes and the effects on the lives of women who appear in pornographic videos produced or distributed without their consent, and C, the legislative measures that could be taken to prevent the production or distribution of non-consensual pornography and all child pornography. So there you go. I have read it into the record, and I will provide a copy later. I think this is a very important issue. My apologies to the witnesses again. Now, I'll jump right into my questions. I was involved in creating setting up the first Jules Carle home in Quebec, which provides care to seniors. And there's also, in my writing, an organization to support care workers. This is so important. It's important to support them. But how can we support our care workers if we don't have all the data, the numbers? And perhaps we could have found it in the long-form census. We could include information in there that would allow us to get more information on the invisible work. So I'd like to hear what the witnesses would have to say about that.
Ms. Doucette?
Well, certainly the time use surveys, the time use studies that Statistics Canada has been collecting and has received a high praise for doing really well. They've been doing it for decades, and certainly since the 1995 Beijing Platform for Action, they've been accelerated in this. It's only every 5 years. The United States collects time use data every year, so there is a question of whether or not we could collect it more often, but it is done with the census. And as I said in my remarks, I think we could do more. I think time use data tells us a lot about the activities and tasks that people do. There are ways to do it better. There are ways to do it better, especially if people are keeping time diaries during the day rather than doing them retrospectively, even a day earlier. But I also believe that we should combine those with qualitative research where we're interviewing people and finding out, shadowing people, spending time with them to see how they actually spend their days. And I think that's especially important with diverse populations. I think Indigenous populations, there may be different conceptions of time. I think there's a lot that we could still tap into and do a better job of looking at how people live their everyday lives. But you can only get so much of that through numbers and through statistics. I think some of it is through stories and narratives and talking to people and listening to people, and then telling those provocative, compelling stories so that people understand and can create social change from those stories.
Rapidement.
Quickly then, the other topic we talked about is the importance to have a day dedicated to care workers to raise awareness. What would you think of having a day dedicated to that?
I think, Nora, I think we already have, there's a Carers Day in Canada. There is one day devoted to carers. Is that correct, Nora?
Pas une journée sur le travail invisible.
Not a day of work. It's a day of work, a day to represent invisible work, volunteering, and working within the families as well.
That's a very good point. And volunteer work is a very, very important part of unpaid work, and I think it's going to become, we've seen it through the pandemic, it's an important part of caring for our neighbors. And I think with the climate crisis, the work that we need to do, the volunteer and community work that we need to do to care for our planet, I think that's going to become more important. So I think that's a great idea to have a larger a care day that recognizes all the invisible work that mainly women do. I like that idea.
Okay, well, we'll go to Ms. Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses. I'd like to start off by asking, the Vanier Institute did a study, and they stated that over their lifetimes, 30% of employed women caregivers report missing at least one full day of work. 6.4% retire early, or they quit or lost paid jobs, and 4.7% turn down job offers for promotions because they're trying to balance paid and unpaid care work. How would, so currently throughout the pandemic, New Democrats push for, and were successful from this government, to get some paid sick leave to cover COVID-related illness and time off that was required. But how could a permanent paid sick leave program and those kinds of provisions help with the balance and the stresses that a lot of mainly women experience because of these responsibilities placed upon them?
Whoever wants to answer, it's fine.
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair. I think the question about managing multiple responsibilities at home, work, and in the community is one that is critically important for us to understand. And there are public supports, and then there are workplace supports. So Andrea can speak specifically about some of the leave provisions. But one of the things that we've been exploring together is the concept of top-ups. So we're all in this together. So if you're going to be on a leave and you're going to be receiving benefits, there's a portion that comes from the government through EI. And then often employers will top that up and sort of either match or increase the amount of funds that are available for that employee when they're away. So that's one part. That's the predictable planned leaves that we can manage in advance. Then there's the short-term ones or the intense ones that are harder to manage, that are harder to predict, but are often the either the trigger or the final straw that results in somebody leaving the paid labor force. And it's those unplanned, unexpected issues like COVID, like mom breaks her hip, like spouse has a heart surgery. Those kinds of situations where you can't always predict are, I think, where we have a fairly big gap. And it's where the employee ends up bearing the brunt of that. So they have to take time off, sometimes unpaid. They have to sometimes step right out of their career and take an unpaid leave or leave the workforce entirely. And oftentimes it's women, and oftentimes when it's related to elder care, it's later in their career path, not exclusively, but often it's later in their career path. So it's a bigger financial hit, it's a bigger impact on their pensionable earnings, on their future earnings. So I think it is something that governments and public policy, but also employers and the labor movement can work together to fill those gaps.
Yeah, just to build on what, thank you very much for the question. And just to build on what Nora said, there is, as you know, there are special benefits under EI, maternity and parental, compassionate, and leave to care for a disabled family member. But as Nora said, the pandemic has demonstrated that we need a broader suite of special benefits if we're thinking about public policy. in terms of parental leave, for example, in Sweden, parental leave can be taken up to the child's age of 8, so that they can respond to particular emergencies in the household, special caregiving responsibilities if the child is dealing with any mental health issues. So this kind of thinking about leaves beyond just the beginning of life and the end of life, what we've seen with the pandemic is all the way through life, there are those moments of uncertainty, and women should not have to pay that high cost of leaving work, reducing work, jeopardizing their long-term economic earnings and pensions because of those uncertainties. So I think public policy-wise, we could think more creatively about special benefits in a broader way. And then also to build on what Nora was saying, the workplace policies are also really important. And Nora, Sphinx, and I are both involved in a project that is trying to put into place in workplaces a caregiver standard where employers would have a kind of consistent way of working with employees when they have these caregiving responsibilities on a regular basis, that they're caring for an elderly person at home or a disabled family member. Workplaces there needs to be some standard for this so that they too can accommodate workers, especially women, but hopefully men as well.
Okay, and I saw the red card, Madam Chair. So, but I do understand because EI is so limited now, it's been cut back so much that expansions upon that 55% certainly is not enough just to get by for the majority of people. So I understand that that's an excellent point. Thank you.
Excellent. We'll go now to our second round of questions. Ms. Shin for 5 minutes.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate our witnesses this morning providing us with very useful information and things that we really need to step back and think more thoroughly through. My first question has to do with mental health. I recognize that a lot of unpaid care work comes through women who are not employed and in the workforce as well, and they don't have access to workplace benefits like mental health care and counseling services. How are women who are unemployed but provide this kind of care at home, recognizing there's probably a lot of stress and pressure? It's not easy taking care of people who are sick or going through hard times. How do they access support for mental health or a support system, especially during times, as you said, when these services are locked out? How are they accessing it? Are they accessing it? And are there any specific areas of mental health challenges that they're expressing? Thank you.
Thank you for your question, Madam Chair. Mental health is something that has been a concern for a long time. What COVID has done is it has magnified, amplified, and intensified the need for our understanding and recognition of the importance of mental health. And the research is clear that people who are trying to balance work and family and provide care during COVID are indicating that their mental health has been impacted. So what we need to know is, where are people going for help? And the first place that they tend to go is their personal circle of support. So their friends, their colleagues, their family members, their extended family members, they're reaching out to each other. Then they go to sort of their first circle of public support, usually their family physician. And it's the family physicians that are often the ones that have to give them the bad news that mental health services and treatment are really difficult to access. And so it's then that the pressure starts to build on these individuals and their families. So we have been conducting a study with family therapists across the country and asking them what's coming to their doors and how well are the therapists doing who are caring for those caregivers and for those individuals dealing with their loneliness and their anxieties and depression. And so what we're seeing is that the family therapists and the psychologists and sociologists across the country that are providing these services are finding that e-health and telehealth and providing counseling over the phone or over the internet is making it more accessible to more people. So they're increasing access. For some, they're indicating that it's increasing their effectiveness. So being able to schedule these routine, but also to be able to provide therapy while people are in their own environments. So it provides them with a lot of information that they wouldn't otherwise receive. So I think it's something that we need to continue to monitor. Clearly, there is a shortage of mental health services available. Certainly from the COVID experience, the telehealth and telecounseling experiences are going to reshape mental health services for decades to come.
Thank you. Did Andrea have anything to add to that?
Thank you for raising that question. The mental health dimensions of unpaid work are not looked at enough. And if I can go back to the issue of measurement and data, time use studies have looked at people's stress in terms of time. But again, if we did follow-up qualitative work, we could tap into people's stresses around time pressures, just not able to get through everything they need to get through in the day because of all of the demands on them. So I think the mental health part of this is critical, and I agree with Nora that it's through COVID, it's been revealed even more. Thank you.
Thank you. Along the same lines, respite opportunities for care workers who are unpaid to get a break. I know that with there's been some single moms that I've run into in my constituency and other places who have very high need.
Unfortunately, you're out of time. Oh. We'll go now to Ms. Sidhu for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just want to give information. Madam Doucette gave yes, mental health issues, especially for senior isolation. It's gonna be, I'm listening a lot in when I was talking to long-term care people, but I'm so glad when our government announced, Prime Minister announced 240 million to develop, expand and launch virtual care, which is wellness together. When adults need a helpline, they can just text to 741-741, and the frontline workers, they can text frontline 741-741. Virtual care, I'm getting a lot of positive feedback. So my question is to Ms. Prince, and anybody can take that. Federal support initiatives such as Canada Child Benefit. I just want to let you know, in my riding, Brampton South, Canada Child Benefit has helped over 24,000 children a year. I know other members got that too. For example, Ms. Sahota is riding 37,000 children getting benefit. Has your research indicated that the CCB Canada Child Benefit has helped families to access childcare so the parents are more able to participate in the workforce instead of being dependent on when I know mostly women they are taking child care and then they are not get paid. Can you, and then Madam Chair, I want to share my time with the Mark after that, this question answered.
Thank you for your question. Certainly the child care benefit has had a positive impact on families and family life. And what we've been asking during COVID, so the early days of COVID, one of the highest levels of stress and anxiety were related to financial stress, that people were worried that they weren't going to have adequate income, that it was their number one stress. Once the CERB and CCB benefits and the supplementary benefits started to roll out, the financial anxiety started to decrease. And then other anxieties started to increase. Isolation, as somebody mentioned earlier, the need for respite, the need for breaks, the need for rest, because one of the things we are documenting very clearly over the last several months is that people are running full out nonstop, and that there are no breaks, there is no rest, there is no weekends. People are working, if you're working outside the home in service sector or healthcare sector, your hours have gone up, your demands have gone up, your number of shifts have gone up. If you're working from home, people are working well into the night over weekends. And so what we need to really do is to understand how significant financial assistance is in tempering the anxiety that people are feeling. So CERB, the CCB, but also some of the other benefits that Andrea had mentioned through EI with the extension of some of the caregiver relief benefits that are available, either targeted specifically to things like veteran families or to low-income families. Financial security makes a huge difference.
Monsieur Serret.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sonia.
Question one is I'm really proud that our government brought in the shared parental leave, so that's very important. But also, I just wanted to ask a question like for myself, 1994, 1997, with the birth of my two girls, and I was only eligible for 10 weeks of parental leave because we chose my wife to stay at home. She was eligible at the time for 25 weeks, so it was not even equal. I was a bit. Why is the woman accessing 25 weeks and the man can't access the 25 weeks? I only had 10. So I wanted to know from your perspective, and I don't have much time right now, 30 seconds left, can you provide the committee with any data, any recommendations why men should have equal amount of parental leave? If the woman finishes, 6 months, why can't the men access the other 6 months? How come it's not equal? For men and women, because as everyone says, men have to be part of the growing, but the system discriminates against men, if I may say that way.
And now you're out of time. Sorry.
So she'll provide the committee.
We're going to go to Madame LaRouche, 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'd like to once again thank the witnesses for everything they've told us. Earlier, you broached a topic of where men stand in all this, and Mr. Serret just brought it up again. In participating in that invisible work at home, I'd like to highlight the incredible success of the paternal leave provided in Quebec. Until 2006, only 1 out of 5 fathers took a few days, and only 10 to 15% of fathers. But now it's 80% of men who take weeks off to take care of children after they've of babies and their families. So that was it was really a huge difference to have parental leave that is paternal leave that is reserved just for them and is not transferable to the woman. So what could we bring as measures at the federal level to encourage more fathers? What other problems could be gotten rid of, obstacles could be gotten rid of to allow fathers to participate more in all this invisible work?
Thank you for raising the issue of fathers and paternity leave and highlighting how well Quebec has done on that front. You're absolutely right. More than 8 out of 10 fathers take leave in Quebec and 1 in 10 fathers in the rest of Canada. What we can learn from Quebec is the parental sharing benefit that the federal government put in was a great move, but it didn't go far enough. The wage replacement rate is low compared to international standards. International commentators have argued that it should be at least 70% so that fathers can actually bargain with their workplaces and can actually take it, or feel that the family can afford for fathers to take leave. And the parental sharing benefit, unlike the Quebec, the QPIP benefit, in Canada, it's not an individual non-transferable entitlement. It's actually dependent on the first parent or the mother. So if the mother takes leave, then the father can take the parental sharing benefit. But we know that 1/3 of mothers in Canada do not receive benefits. So there's already a disadvantage built in, and less economically advantaged families will be affected by that. So we need to learn more from Quebec. I really think that we should just adopt a very similar model.
Very good. And then we go to Ms. Matheson for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I'd like to sort of pick up where we left off in terms of the extension of programs and benefits, looking at different alternatives. Certainly, for low-paid workers, having a guaranteed livable wage is key, and certainly New Democrats have been putting forward the idea of a basic income, a livable wage, and so I wouldn't mind you guys talking about that. But also, I wanted to hear, there was mention of the ILO, and they have had since 2011 a recommendation 189 for countries to take on that discusses and addresses unpaid work and domestic work. Now, Canada hasn't signed on, and I'm wondering how that would help provide direction to Canada in this for unpaid work and care workers. Thank you.
Well, they should definitely sign on to the ILO convention, and thank you for raising that point. The basic income, as you know, through COVID, because of CERB, there's been a really rich conversation, and I know there's a UBC study that is about to come out, or it's coming. It's coming out soon, which looks at, I think, about 5 different models of a basic income or a minimum acceptable income. So I think I'm looking forward to the research on this to see what version of this might work in a Canadian context. And I'll turn it over to Nora if she has anything to add.
Yeah, nothing to add. Thank you.
Do I have time? I do, Madam Chair?
40 seconds.
Okay.
40 seconds.
20 seconds. All right. So in terms of, we heard about the child tax benefit, certainly has helped some, but doesn't help all. So how would, moreover, a universal, affordable childcare system with an act attached to provinces to ensure that universality, how would that better impact families and parents in this economy?
Well, you need both. The child benefit, the increases were so widely praised and accepted, and a very important initiative, especially for low-income families and single-parent families. But it doesn't replace a national child care program. They need to go hand in hand. And in the same way that we need to improve and enhance our parental leave system, they all work together so that families can care for their children and be financially supported to care for their children and are assured that their children are well cared for. In the Nordic countries, it's a right for children to have good care. And so in Sweden, for example, there's no gap between the end of parental leave and the beginning of childcare, and that's a child's right to good care. I would love to see Canada take that approach, which is looking through a child's rights approach, and that all people should have good care.
Unfortunately, we're out of time for the panel. I want to thank our witnesses. You've been tremendous. And just to inform the committee, we're going to suspend briefly before the next panel starts in order to do another sound check. So just hang tight. second panel on our study on unpaid work. We have with us José Bégin, who is the Director General from Stats Canada, and we have Vincent Dale, another director for the Labor Market Information, and Tina Chu, who's Acting Director in Diversity and Sociocultural Statistics. They have quite a bit of information to give, and so they've requested to be able to speak for 10 minutes. And because StatsCan is our only witness, I think it'd be fine unless there's an objection from the committee. With that, we'll go ahead then. 10 minutes. Are we starting with you, Mr. Dale?
No, in fact, Madam Chair, we are starting with me. I will be presenting on behalf.
Excellent, très bien. Vous pouvez commencer.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, committee members, I would like to thank you for the opportunity today to share with you some observations on women's unpaid work. In the time I have, I would like to begin with a portrait of unpaid work in Canada, including caregiving. The second part of my presentation will focus on the situation of healthcare support workers. According to the most recent data from the General Social Survey, women spend more time than men doing unpaid work. Every 5 years, the results of this survey provide insights into the time use of Canadians, including time spent on unpaid work, which shed light on how Canadians make use of their time and what contributes to their well-being and stress levels. The most recent data on time use are from 2015. In this survey, unpaid work is defined as the time spent doing housework, performing routine tasks related to the physical care of children, and providing care to an adult member or friend. In 2015, women spent an average of 2.8 hours per day on housework, 54 minutes more than men, for whom that was 1.9 hours per day. Women were more likely than men to perform routine tasks related to the physical care of children, 76% of women versus 57% of men, spending almost an hour more per day than men on these tasks. The proportion of women who provided care to an adult family member or friend on a given day was 3 times higher than the proportion of men in 2015, 3% for women compared with 1% for men. Among those who provided this care, women spent an average of 42 minutes more on adult caregiving than men. While women tend to spend more time than men on unpaid activities, they're less likely to be in the labor force. And for those who are, they're more likely to have a part-time job. According to data from the Labor Force Survey, 57% of women in Canada were employed in 2015, compared with 65% of men. In addition, women who were employed generally spent on average 6.9 hours less per week at work than men, all jobs combined. That is 29.6 hours for women versus 36.5 hours for men. The situation in November was similar. 56% of women were employed, compared with 65% of men. What's more, women worked 5.8 hours less per week than men, based on the data from the survey that is not seasonally adjusted. It is important to recognize that the disproportionate unpaid work done by women for their families favors the higher labor force participation rate and longer working hours of men. Reflecting this disproportionate share of unpaid work, women were also more likely than men to feel time pressures. In 2015, 49% of women aged 25 to 54 in Canada reported that at the end of their day, they had often not accomplished what they had set out to do, compared with 43% of men. 69% of women said they felt stressed when they didn't have enough time, versus 60% of men. And 46% of women reported feeling constantly under stress, trying to accomplish more than they can handle, as opposed to 40% of men. The results of a crowdsourcing survey on mental health during the pandemic conducted by Statistics Canada in April revealed that the women who participated in this study were more likely than men to state that their lives were quite or extremely stressful. In particular, 30.5% of women who participated said that their lives were quite a bit or extremely stressful during the COVID-19 pandemic, versus 24% of men. Some female participants may have reported a higher stress level than male participants because the quarantine exacerbated the uneven distribution of unpaid family work. That is, caring for children and housework between women and men in households. The closure of daycares, schools, and businesses such as restaurants and dry cleaners may have led women to do the unpaid work in the home that they usually outsourced to the paid economy or for which they received help from parents or friends. Moreover, the results of the Canadian Perspective Surveys Series 3, Resuming Economic and Social Activities During COVID-19, indicate that employment status and workplace, both strongly impacted by the pandemic, affected the distribution of parental tasks within couples. For example, when men were not employed or were working at home, it seems to favor better sharing of parental tasks, since these men were more likely to state that parental tasks were shared equally than men who were employed and worked outside the home. However, in the opposite situation, when women were not employed or were working at home, they were more likely to report that they mostly performed the parental tasks and were less likely to say that these responsibilities were shared equally. Now, I would like to move on and talk about women's experiences of paid work, and particularly the experiences of healthcare support workers. For months, these workers have been at the forefront of the battle against COVID-19, the vast majority of whom are women. The COVID-19 pandemic has highlighted the pivotal role these workers play. In addition to the risks of contamination to which they're exposed, the media have described sometimes less favorable working conditions, as well as a shortage of labor in this economic sector. According to data from the Leader Force survey, there were close to 300,000 healthcare support workers, defined here as nurse aides, orderlies, and patient service associates. This number is relatively stable compared with the number with November of last year. Many aspects of their working conditions, however, seem inferior when compared with average workers. In November, their hourly wage was close to $22 on average, or almost $8 below the national average. These employees also worked around 3 hours less per week than the average, and they were slightly more likely to hold a temporary job and to have more than one job. For example, in November, healthcare support workers put in 29 hours versus 32 hours for all other employees, and 15% of them had a temporary job compared with 11% for all other employees. Furthermore, 6% of healthcare support workers had more than one job, compared with 4% for all other employees. Labor force survey data show that these occupations are a gateway to the labor market for many immigrants. In fact, 4 in 10 healthcare support workers in November were immigrants versus 1 in 4 for all other employees. They also indicate, my apologies, that's the end of the time you have.
The rest of it when we go to questions. So we'll start with Ms. Wong for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, panelists from Statistics Canada, and for a very detailed report on the stats you collected in 2015, and echoes what our two former panelists just said. So my question is about the market rates. Like, do you have a dollar figure of how much the labor of unpaid caregivers, care workers, if you use that term, would translate to if they were paid market rates? Any of the the panelists can answer this question. Do you have that data, please?
So, Madam Chair, if I understood the question correctly, it's about giving a figure value to the amount that unpaid work would be representing. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for the question. I can start, and I will ask my colleague Vincent and Tina if there's anything to add at the end. So the value of household work in Canada was last updated in 1992. It was updated prior to that in 1986 and also in 1971. As of 1992, the value of household work was estimated to be between 31% and 46% of gross domestic product, depending on the method chosen to evaluate that amount. It hasn't been measured since then in terms of dollar value, and this is in relation to a framework on how we measure the gross domestic product. But we would be happy to share additional information around that if necessary.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I remember that in 2015, the Ministry for Seniors did do a study on the loss of productivity for these caregivers, who choose to not to do full-time job or not to have a promotion because of that. So some of the data might be still there, I hope. Now, another question is about the kind of data collected. The previous panelists also mentioned about qualitative data. Yes, it is important that we put numbers in, just like what I just asked about loss of productivity. But there's also the qualitative side of it. So has Statistics Canada done any qualitative research? Like, of course, shadowing the caregiving is not that easy, but anything close, even close to that?
Madam Chair, I'm wondering if my colleague Tina could explain the kind of qualitative work that has been done around the general social survey. Tina?
Okay. Hi, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I agree, like qualitative work is very important, especially like I want to relate like Madam Spent from Vanier Institutes about like talking about the dynamic of unpaid work, which is like relationship personal. So it is very hard to measure or quantify that like in a big scale survey. So for Statistics Canada, whenever like we develop any survey, we will start with qualitative research. Like so, like we will still have the survey aspect, which is asking like in form of the questions. But in terms of developing the questions, we do use qualitative methods and focus groups and whatnot to make sure that like what we intend to measure, it's understood from our respondents.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And my next question is about any recommendation, you would make to the government so that, both on the economic side as well as on the well-being side of the family caregivers, what they could have done or what they should do. Well, it is not meant to be criticizing, so I think you are pretty safe in speaking freely.
Madam Chair, I will start on behalf of Statistics Canada. I think it would be difficult for us to answer that question. I think for us, what is key is really, as Tina explained, that we do ask questions to our respondents that are well understood, that are meaningful. We do understand that the topic of unpaid work is very important. And as Tina mentioned, it is measured by the General Social Survey. So in terms of recommendations to the government, I think it would be hard for us to really answer that question.
Now, my next question is about labor market. Now,
actually, you're out of time, Alice. We're going to go to Ms. Sahid for 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to Statistics Canada for providing some important information. Based on your opening remarks, you mentioned the data from 2015. So you mentioned that approximately 76% versus 57% men, like women are spending time with their children, raising children. So do you have any data after 2015, since the Liberals came into power and implemented the shared parental leave, that has the shared parental leave made some difference, or do we see changes to the time being spent by the women to raise their kids? Anyone can take that.
Madam Chair, I will turn to my colleague Tina so that she can maybe address the frequency of the General Social Survey and when would be the next time that we would be measuring the unpaid work.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for the questions. You're correct. The last time that we conduct the time use survey, which is part of the General Social Survey program, was in 2015, and the survey is conducted every 5 years. So the next one that we are hoping to collect, actually, like we are at the moment developing the content of the survey, and so the next one that we are planning to collect is actually early 2022. Now, so I cannot at this point to answer your questions directly, but what I can offer you is that through the last time, the time use survey, and so we are able to conduct some analysis and looking at the changes, and for changes in terms of previous result of the time use survey. And the time use survey was first conducted in I think we did the comparison between 1986 and 2015. And based on that analysis, we did find that there is, based on the analysis, and between 1986 and 2015, fathers are spending more time on preparing meals, and mothers providing nearly 2/3 of the total hours spent helping and caring for children. And fathers are more likely to engage in household chores like housework and whatnot. So between that period from 1986 and 2015, there is an increase of fathers participating more into the unpaid work.
Thank you for that. Would like once we have the latest survey, would like to see how the shared parental leave has made a difference. I, as a mother, also spent 4 years from 2000 to 2004 raising my 2 young kids. So I started work in Canada in 2004. My next question is in regards to the ethnic lens. So we know that a number of factors can influence the proportion of unpaid work performed in a household between men and women, such as the cultural expectations, upbringing, the levels of paid work performed, and so on. We also know that these influences can vary by ethnicity. For example, some visible minority populations are more likely to live in intergenerational households with 3 generations under one roof, and I see many in my own riding of Scarborough Centre. Has your research looked at differences across ethnic lines, and did you find significant differences? Do you have any data which you can provide to the committee? If not today, maybe you can send in a written submission to provide that data.
Thank you for the questions. Definitely, there is variations when you look at from the diversity lens. And we know that from certain communities, there is a higher likelihood of multi-generational household. So that would increase in terms of the demand on the caregiver to either the children's or a senior in the household. But there is I cannot provide the data today, and because there is a challenge with the general social survey. We do, for that type of detailed analysis, we do need the data set, the sample, to be able to provide robust statistics. But as Statistics Canada, we are looking into way to improve that, and so that we can provide more on the disaggregated data and the diversity lens. Thank you.
Do I have time, Madam Chair?
30 seconds.
No, it's okay.
Okay, very good. Maintenant, nous allons...
And now we'll move on to Ms. Larouche, 6 minutes. Thank you very much to the representatives from Statistics Canada to be here. It's been shown that when you can properly document information, it's very helpful. For example, for unpaid work or invisible work, when we can put numbers to it, it can really help us find solutions. Now, I have 2 questions. First, you spoke about the numbers and the impacts of the pandemic, and we can see from the numbers that there has been a different impact on men and on women. The pandemic is not over. We're talking a lot about relaunching the economy, and now looking at the numbers and seeing how things are changing, we know that the sectors that will see more support will be construction and infrastructure, where the fields are more male-dominated, rather than the restaurant sector, the cultural sectors, where it's more dominated by women. The economy will recover much more slowly in those sectors. So what are the effects of the pandemic on the invisible work, and what numbers do you have further to that?
Alors, Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair, I'd like to thank you for the question. The answer I'm proposing is 2-pronged. First, as I stated in my opening remarks, some numbers are from a crowdsourcing survey conducted in April, and some more detailed results will be published by Statistics Canada next week. So we can send you more information regarding this study, which will be providing more data. And generally speaking, in terms of the participation of women in the labor force, we have conducted a survey every month through the labor force survey. We have a lot of information broken down by age categories, people from visible minorities, for example. So we can also provide the latest report of the labor force survey if the committee wishes. Perfect. You also touched briefly on this, that is the monetary and economic value of invisible work here in Canada. You said that the last numbers we have are from 2012. That's a long time ago. How can we measure these numbers? And when we become aware of the monetary value of the invisible work that is done, we realize that it's very important to support the various sectors and aspects related to that. And we see that women are having women much later, and women find themselves in the sandwich situation. They're the sandwich generation. They care for their children and their parents. So could you give us more details on how to calculate that invisible work in terms of numbers and monetary value, and how we can raise our awareness? Madam Chair, I'd like to clarify that it's 1992 that we last put a monetary value to unpaid work. I don't have the information here with me to be able to explain how those calculations were made in terms of the GDP. That is how unpaid work is part of the production in Canada, but Statistics Canada can definitely provide additional information after the meeting. Yes, it was to help us better understand. These are huge numbers. In 92, you stated that it was 235. I mean, I have between 235 and $374 billion. That includes volunteering. And volunteer work, I mean, if we had to pay all these people, I just wanted all this work. And if it was properly paid, it would be important to look at that. And also, we'd have to update that information. 92 is a long time ago. I think we would be astounded to see what the numbers would be right now. Do I still have time, Madam Chair? 1 minute. Great. In that case, I'll go ahead with another question. Now, to tackle the inequality between the genders in terms of invisible work, would it also be important to understand why in 2020 we still see so much inequality between the sexes? Would understanding the causes help us? And how could it help us?
Madame la Présidente, je vais me tourner.
Madam Chair, I'll turn to my colleague Tina, who will be able to provide details on the context regarding for the questions in the General Social Survey regarding unpaid work.
Unfortunately, you're out of time on that one. We'll go now to Ms. Matheson for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So can someone tell me why unpaid work has not been reevaluated since 1992?
Alors, Madame la Présidente, je peux commencer. C'est vraiment une question de définition en termes de production et de consommation. Donc, il y a plusieurs.
This is really an issue of how it's quantified. There are many ways to see how it can be measured, how unpaid work can be measured, that is to authenticate it and assign a monetary value to it. It's based on definitions. But in terms of measures, to understand the measures and the impacts rather on the people portion of our population that engage in unpaid work, we at Statistics Canada do have a tool for collecting information, as my colleague Tina mentioned, which measures every 5 years or so this very important phenomenon.
Okay. So you have the ability to do it, you just haven't been told to do it since 1992.
Madame la Présidente, je pourrais...
Madam Chair, I wouldn't be able to answer that question because it's not part of my expertise.
And you spoke about the General Social Survey. So it was last done 2015. You said every 5 years, but you also said it was in 2022 was the next. So how are you going to compensate for the significant changes that COVID will have on people's responses? How will that be indicated? And how will that impact? I guess you can't determine how it will be impacted, but how will you deal with that impact of COVID?
Thank you for the questions. I think it is, yes, StatsCan, so for the General Social Survey program, yes, we want to do more frequent of the surveys. But in the program itself, we have 7 themes, and we cycle the themes. And certain years we have the themes overlap within a 5-year cycle. This is only for the purpose of kind of competing demands for the different content of each cycle. So for the unpaid work segment, that themes, a lot of the estimates are coming from the time use survey, but we also have another cycle called caregiving and receiving that will give us a little bit more about the dynamics of caregiving and receiving. We have a cycle called family dynamic, and looking at the relationship within the family, fertility intentions, whatnot. And we also have a survey called giving, volunteering, and participation, which is also measure another aspect of the unpaid work. So we combine, I think to holistically look at the unpaid economy, that aspect, we need to look at every the relevant cycles, and so that's. But I agree with you that time use, and we use time use a lot to measure the unpaid work, and it is not an easy survey, and because it's a diary base, and it imposes a lot of response burden on our respondents. So for us, we can we do it? I think we can, but at the same time, we also need to balance between response burden and whether how much we ask our Canadians to respond to our survey. And to answer your questions about the impact of COVID, do we have information about impact of COVID? So the General Social Survey is a regular program at Statistics Canada, but during the initial stage of the lockdown, Stats can really mobilize ourselves and to put in other alternative collections mechanism platform, like the crowdsource survey, the web panel. So we measure the impact directly on COVID, and we are more targeted in terms of the questions, the impact of COVID, where as for the general social survey, because we want to measure how social conditions change like over time. So we have to maintain certain consistency in terms of the content from the previous cycle. Thank you.
Okay, and now we'll go to Ms. Shin for 5 minutes.
Thank you all so much for being here and sharing very fascinating data with us. My question really has to do with the overlapping of different things you were looking for when you did the survey. For example, regarding unpaid care work, is there an overlap in your survey that you did with any socioeconomic groups, ethnic groups, marital status, age, province, rural versus urban areas, and if there were any patterns or any predominant overlaps that you noticed?
Thank you for the questions. Yes, indeed, we have different cycles of the GSS that can measure a certain aspect of the unpaid work. And in each of the cycle, we also have a series of socioeconomic characteristics that we measure the respondents. You mentioned about like, yes, I think immigrants status, visible minority, like population groups question which we use to derive the visible minority populations, and generations and or residents of the respondents from which we derive the rural and urbans and whatnot. But the biggest challenge is the sample size, whether we are able to drill down in that level of details in our analysis so that like the data is robust and statistically significant. So we have to, and each cycle, the response rate somewhat varied. So when people ask us that type of questions, we cannot answer for sure, but have to go to the data and extract the data, look at the level of significance, and see whether the estimates is significant.
Thank you. So in terms of the response rate, you said some are more difficult to get responses from. What are some of those areas that are difficult to get responses from?
I mentioned about the time use survey because it's a diary-based survey, and so it's a lot more challenging to achieve a good response rate. And but we have put into at Statistics Canada, we are ongoing looking at ways to improve how to get better measures and achieve the desired response rate. So we are planning as we go and look at when we collect in the field, we look at where might we need the domains of estimations for certain populations, and if the response for that category is not good enough, then we will have CADI, in the world of, let's say if the survey is a electronic questionnaire, and we will have reminder letters. We send out reminder letters for people, encourage people to respond, and we also have field follow-up by telephone by our interviewer.
Thank you. So during this COVID pandemic, has it been more challenging to gather information, or could you speak into what it's been like and some areas there that you found to be some data that was predominant?
On that, I think so we have a series of crowdsourced survey and web panel, and that is measured during the COVID, and we have very good response, I must say, because I think these are issues that really important to Canadians. So we have very concert effort of communications to encourage people to come to our website to respond to those surveys. So in fact, like certain survey, we have very good response, but maybe perhaps my colleague Vince could maybe speak to his experience in terms of the labor force survey.
Sure, and thank you for the question. So the labor force survey is conducted every month using a combination of face-to-face and telephone interviews. And we have seen a decrease in the response rate over the COVID period, largely because we have suspended face-to-face or personal visit interviews. So that has resulted in a drop in response rate. The good news is that the quality of the survey remains very high. The LFS is a very accurate reflection of the labor market, but we are taking a series of measures to restore those response rates back to where they were pre-COVID.
Thank you very much. And now we'll go to Monsieur Sarré, 5 minutes.
5 minutes, Mr. Serré. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to the witnesses. First, 70% of Statistics Canada employees in Ontario are in my riding in Sturgeon Falls, so I'd like to thank the bilingual employees who do the work at Statistics Canada. My first question is a quick one, Ms. Bégin. I don't have a lot of time, so could you give the committee to the chair, through the chair, summary of the statistics that are related to what's happening in Canada? Could you do that, please? Thank you.
Alors,
Madam Chair, to answer quickly. The geographical section portion. I was just asking for you to just send that information in because I don't have a lot of time. Great. Yes, we can definitely do that after the meeting. Excellent. Now, the second question I have, you said that the survey was in 2017 and the next one will be in 2027. Now, looking at the parental leave system that we recently introduced and the CCB, the Canada Child Benefit, do you have a way right now of looking at the impact these measures have had over the past few years, or do we have to wait till 2027 or 2022? Madam Chair, I'll start with the response, and then my colleague Vincent can chime in as well. So in Statistics Canada, we have information regarding the tax returns from Canadians. We provide information each year, and the CCB is included. So we could provide that information to the committee after the meeting. But we also have statistics on employment insurance and those who are eligible for EI benefits, including parental leave. So we will be able to provide that information and do a comparison of the data before and after the pandemic. Okay, that's great. So if you could send us that information, that would be good.
Our government introduced the impact of disaggregated data, which makes our ability to respond to different populations, something that obviously the previous government was kind of anti-data. So we introduced this measure. What kind of impact has that had for your collection of data?
Madam Chair, I will turn to my colleague Tina to start the response.
Thank you. Merci pour votre question.
Thank you for your question. I will respond in English.
So yes, as we all are well aware of, the pandemic actually exacerbate the inequalities faced by many communities, the vulnerable communities and indigenous populations and racialized communities and whatnot. So we have put into a number of measures for the diversity and inclusion lens. And there's a couple. One involved the work with my colleague Vince, and in the labor force survey. And since July, we incorporated questions, population questions, group questions, which we could derive include the visible minority population. We also include in the general social survey the cycle on social identity, which look at trust, sense of belongings, trust of institutions and etc. For that survey, we actually increase through the work with Canadian Heritage, we increase the sample of that survey so that we can provide estimate on a number of visible minority groups and also education level and income level. So there are a couple of efforts that we have already put in place to provide that disaggregated data lens and the diversity and the inclusions. So going forward with the work that we are going to do, we hope to, for any of our analysis, to include the diversity and inclusion lens in our analysis. And I'm responsible
Sorry,
for...
that's your time. Okay. Now we're going to Madame Larouche, 2.5.
2 minutes and a half. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Well, listen, we're here at the Standing Committee on the Status of Women, and there was a significant group of women in my riding who, in 2010, when the long-form census had been abolished by Statistics Canada, there were questions in the long-form census on invisible work. It's an essential procedure for the work to be recognized socially and otherwise. So what have been the consequences of the long-form census being cancelled in 2010 on your data collection and analysis? Madam Chair, I can answer that question. The concepts related to unpaid work were measured in the 1996, 2001, and 2006 surveys or censuses, and there were 3 questions regarding housework, house maintenance work, and yard work. After each census, we conduct exhaustive consultations in order to ensure that we have questions that really reflect the situation that could lead to new legislation or programs or that reflect the needs. It was decided at the time that the questions regarding unpaid work would not be part of the 2011 census or on the General Household Survey. We recognize the importance of those questions, those concepts associated with unpaid work. And for us, it's the General Social Survey, which is the best way to ask further questions, provide more context in terms of unpaid work performed by Canadians. Okay, because we know that it's not just on a personal level that there's a difference, or on the household level, there's also a social impact. That's why it's necessary. It's essential that governments recognize it, whether it's inclusion in the GDP or credit, tax credits, and so on. A day to recognize it. What can we do to really push for that recognition?
We'll go now to Ms. Matheson for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we know that childcare is becoming increasingly expensive. There's a stat on families spending nearly a quarter of their household income on childcare. And I know that we heard from you about the percentage of women or how much less fewer women are taking on that full-time work, or how they move to more part-time work because of their responsibilities of care. Unpaid care work. Do you have statistics on how much money is lost by those women on a yearly basis or so on because they are taking on the additional unpaid work as recent as possible?
Alors, Madame la Présidente.
Madam Chair. we do not have information that could represent that lost income or revenue. We have information that we got through the General Social Survey regarding the inclusion of women in the workforce and their positions. We also have additional information through the workforce survey, but we do not have information regarding the loss that could be represented here. It would really be an issue of research that we'd have to focus on.
And how would that be included if a government were to include that in future? How would they dictate that to StatsCan to make the decision to include that cost analysis?
Alors, Madame la
Well, Madam Chair, there are a few ways to set research priorities. There are the Canadian government's priorities that will direct Statistics Canada's research, and we also have partnerships with our partners, whether it's at the federal, provincial governments or outside government.
That's fine. Thank you,
we
Madam
really
President.
don't have time for a full slate for our next two, so I want to thank our witnesses from StatsCan. Please submit the data that has been requested by the various members to the clerk, and certainly we are going to have lots of fun things to work on in the new year. When we return in January, we'll be considering our COVID study report on the Tuesday, and possibly the Thursday if we need that second day. And then we have pay equity confirmed for February 4th, and then we'll continue with our panels on rural and unpaid work. So if you have any other witnesses to submit, get them to the clerk. I want to wish all of our panelists and all of our committee members, clerk, our analyst, a very happy holiday, a very safe holiday. Take some time to rest. It's been a tough year, and we know 2021 will be much better. So thanks so much. I'm adjourning the meeting.
Thank you, Marilyn. Happy holidays to everyone.